Hi everyone, it's Bronwen. Welcome to Botany with Bronwen Part 2. Oops! So usually in my videos I introduce you to one of my little furry friends in the house. So today, looking very nervous, this is Figgy. Her name is Fig. She's a little rescue dog and we don't know what her background was, but she's a little bit timid and shy, but she is now very sweet and affectionate. She just doesn't love this right now, but she's a good girl. Bye. Today's episode I will be talking about my top 10 plants for the year 2020, which was overall not the greatest year, but my plants kept me feeling like I had purpose and they gave me something to do. So for me, plants were definitely a big help in 2020. For each plant, I'm going to go over kind of the general care, so light and water requirements for the plant, talk about why I love it, talk about how much space it's going to take up, and if it's toxic or non-toxic to animals, and last but not least, kind of a level or what plant might work for you. But again, I can tell you if a plant is kind of easier or harder for me to keep alive, but it's also dependent on your style of plant care and what kind of conditions you have in your home. I should mention that all of the plants that I'm talking about today, while some are toxic, non-toxic, etc., they're all pretty readily available if you're in the greater Montreal area. In Canada, I think in general, they may be more rare in other places, but over here they're relatively easy to find and not super expensive. Now for the first plant. My dogs are all excited now. Cool. So plant number one is called commonly a Staghorn Fern. So I will show it to you. This is the plant. So it's kind of hard to see. Some people have it as a hanging plant, but I can't really hang things in my condo. So I have it as a plant in a large basket that sits on the floor. So the reason that I love this plant is because it's really unique and strange looking. It has this kind of shield in the middle, and these fronds are there to protect the plant and to take up water and nutrients. And then these kind of other fronds grow out, and they can grow up to 35 inches or 90 centimeters long on this species of fern. So just if you have one, know that they can get quite heavy, like I'm out of breath right now, and they can also get quite long. So you kind of need like a wide space in which to keep them. This is Whiskey's tail. He'd like to tell everyone that he is here and he's loving my computer. Okay. So in terms of care, this fern likes bright indirect light. So I would say an east-facing window is good. Hello. My Staghorn also gets some direct morning light in a south-facing window that's partially obstructed. So it's okay if it gets direct light. It does burn in some cases, so you kind of have to keep an eye on the leaves, but bright indirect light is best. It can be in a shadier spot. So this kind of fern is an epiphyte, so that means that it grows on other things like other trees. So it is kind of below things in the forest canopy, and it's native to Australia, Southeast Asia, and Africa. So it can tolerate a little bit less water than some other ferns. The last thing that I didn't mention is a lot of ferns are slow growing, and this Staghorn Fern, because I've kept it in bright and direct light, it's actually grown really fast and really wide. So it's one of those plants that if you do get it when it's smaller, I've kept it in its 8-inch pot, but it's really exploded in growth. I've had it for a year to a year and a half. Another cool thing about this plant is that it is non-toxic to cats. Thank you, Whiskey. To dogs and to horses. So according to the ASPCA, non-toxic, so you don't have to worry about pets or children getting into it. So plant number two is the Asparagus Fern. So I think this is called the Asparagus densiflorus. It's not at all a fern. So something that distinguishes it from a fern is that it gets these little white flowers and it can grow berries afterward. those are also very, very toxic to animals and children, etc. So not a great plant to keep in reach if you have little ones or pets that like to eat plants. So this plant I love because it's very unique looking. It actually grows pretty fast and it likes bright indirect light, again, east. I actually have mine in a south facing partially obstructed window and it's pretty happy. It does need a lot of watering, so I always keep the soil moist to the touch at the top. Some plants you want to let dry out a little ways down into the soil. This one, you want to keep it moist at all times. Another species of Asparagus Fern, also very beautiful to me at least. It's really feathery. The foliage is extremely delicate, but it's actually quite a hardy plant. Again, you have to make sure that the soil is always moist to the touch. Ideally, it will dry out if you don't, and I've cut back at the stem. I think you can see it, but I've cut back some of the fronds that just completely dried out and browned. So it is also a pretty fast grower, not quite as voracious as this guy over here, but it's just a beautiful architectural plant, and it's quite different looking from all the kind of jungle plants and the cacti, etc., that are really popular. So I love this one. Just remember that it is toxic. In terms of level for this plant, I would say that it's a great beginner plant, but only if you like to water your plants constantly and check the soil constantly. If not, it's actually more advanced in that you have to pay more attention to it and make sure that it's always moist. Plant number 3 is the Scindapsus pictus argyrius. This is one of a few different varieties with different markings on the leaves. I love this plant because it's very beautiful, it's easy to grow, it's very fast growing. It does tend to get a little bit more leggy on the bottom, so you can let it grow really long, but it's one of those plants that you can cut back just above a node here, which is where the main stem meets the leaf stem. You see this little brown bump there. That's where roots will emerge if you cut just below it. Cut, pop into water, and then either put back into the plant to make it more full on the top, or you can make new plants, which I have done with this one a few times. In terms of care, when it needs water, the leaves will curl up, so it's one of those plants that is pretty good about telling you when it needs water. It doesn't like too much water, so you can certainly let it dry out. I would say this is a great beginner plant. Another one, unfortunately, that's toxic to animals, but you can hang it quite high if you're willing to take the risk, and that's a great way to keep it away from animals. Number 4, neon or lemon lime pothos. I'll show you bigger plants that trail down, but before it starts trailing, the leaves kind of stay upright. It's a very perky plant, and they're kind of bouncy leaves. And as they need water, or the leaves will wilt and get kind of, you'll just be able to feel it if you get used to the feel of the leaves when it's watered and when it needs water. Right now, this one's happy. The leaves are still bouncy and they're still all, kind of facing up. Another one that I think is really beautiful is called, I think this is a Pearls and Jade. There are a few different color varieties or cultivars. It was a smaller plant and it was standing upright, and now it's starting to trail down. I bought it this way. I did not grow it this big. But this is called the pothos is the epipremnum aureum, and this is golden pothos. It's got kind of a yellow variegation. Some people really don't like these, but the thing about pothos that's really neat is that they can grow in low light conditions. It will appreciate higher light. The higher light, the more coloring you'll see in the leaves. The more light that you give plants that are variegated, the better that variegation will show up. I just want to show you as I'm going through, I'm kind of checking my plants and seeing if they're in good health. This is totally normal. Yellow leaves are normal. Just want to normalize it. If you see a yellow leaf on your plant, you can probably pretty easily pick it off if you really don't like it. The next plant, commonly known as the snake plant, but it has been moved now to the Dracaena genus, but you'll most often see it sold as sanseveria or snake plant. That was my cat. I was checking on this plant. This one has been hit by pests a little bit. This is kind of I'm not sure what variety it is. There are like hundreds of different colorways for this plant. But I'm looking at it and I saw that it had this offshoot, so it kind of grows. As you can see, there are a few different main kind of plants. You can actually separate these and propagate them to make more plants. Unfortunately though, one of them didn't make it. It's probably due to me treating for pests and overwatering. This is kind of gross looking, but it's definitely a case of root rot and or stem rot. So these plants do not like to be watered often. You can water them when they're completely dry. When you notice that the leaves are soft, because these are quite cardboard-like, but when they're more pliable and you can bend them, like I still wouldn't water this because this is new growth. I can tell from the base. It looks like it's a baby offshoot of the mother plant, so I still wouldn't use this as an example. New growth tends to be more tender, but if the main plant is still cardboard, do not water. If you do, you may end up with something like this, which is kind of sad. There are ways to propagate this though from the stems, so it's possible that I can just chop these and put it in water and I can make another plant. I'm gonna look into that later. I also found this in the soil, which what is this? It looks like something has broken out of it. So when you have plants, if you're skeeved out by bugs, you're gonna get used to it, or you're gonna decide the plants aren't for you, because sometimes you find the weirdest stuff. All right, so I promised you that I'd show you, I don't know if I actually promised anything, but I'm gonna show you a couple of other types of sanseveria, or Dracaena, if you wanna go there. This is called a whale fin commonly. It's pretty big. I think it's a Masoniana is the Latin name. This one came as one leaf, which some people are like, why would you want to plant with one leaf? So this is the main leaf. I just think it's really beautiful, sculptural. It's got really interesting coloring, variegation here. And this was just this little tiny point poking out of the soil, and about 5 months later, maybe less, it is almost as big as its parent. So this is pretty cool. This is a plant that I might split up and make 2 plants because I kind of like the one leaf look. Super neat. This is a Sanseveria Moonlight cultivar, I think it's called. It's a very light kind of silvery color, very beautiful. And look, it's so tiny. These plants grow super slow. So if you're looking for something to fill vertical space and you don't want something that takes up a lot of room, or you're looking for something large and sculptural that fills vertical space, Sanseveria are a really good choice. They will also tolerate low light. Always, they will put up with it, but they prefer to have more light. So this plant can be put in a range of light conditions. Just make sure it has some light. And like I said, do not water frequently. You will kill the plant. This is, I mentioned, kind of squishing the leaf. This is another sign that it might be dry. It's kind of gotten a little bit dehydrated there. These plants are unfortunately toxic to animals. My animals aren't interested in the majority of my plants, but these are kind of hard to bite into, so they have that going for them. Plant genus number 6 is the Calathea family. So these are lower light plants because they live on the understory in nature. They are shaded or sheltered from direct sunlight, so they can certainly survive lower light conditions. So these plants are a little bit more fussy. This is actually one of the easier varieties. It's soft and velvety. This is called a jungle velvet Calathea, or Calathea warzaweskiae, I think is the Latin name. And these plants are also in the Marantaceae family, so they're prayer plants. So they move at night, these leaves stand up, and during the day, they are down like this. So it's a really dynamic and interesting plant. And this one, especially the jungle velvet, I found has been a very fast grower. Some of them are less so. This behind me is also Calathea. It has pretty large leaves. I believe it's a Rosiopicta medallion, something like that. It had a very bad spider mite infestation this summer. Calatheas are very prone to spider mites because they have these thin papery leaves, and unfortunately they, like I said, they're a little bit fussier plants, so you do have to keep them moist. You have to make sure that you water them with, again, never cold water. You can try the distilling technique that I mentioned at the beginning, because they do not like water straight from the tap, and so often you see things like back here, like crispy edges on the leaves. That is normal. Again, plants are not perfect in nature. They're not going to be perfect in our homes. I think I stole that saying from somebody else, but you know what I mean. I would say Calathea are not a beginner plant, but I do have a plant in the same family that I wanted to show you that could be good for beginners. So plant number 7 is the Maranta leuconeura. They are, like I mentioned, the Calatheas are in the Marantaceae family, which is the common name is the prayer plant family. So these are the Marantas. It's commonly known as a rabbit foot Maranta. And again, probably very prone to spider mites because it has these thin papery leaves, so you really want to keep an eye on it. They like Calatheas, they like high humidity, they don't like to dry out. They're a little bit fussier about the water. This kind of leaf tip browning is normal, so don't worry about it. But they're fast growers. This little leaf here is going to unfurl. And so this one has grown a lot since I got it, and they're just generally like a little bit easier care than some of the other Calatheas, like this one behind me. I think the reason that I had pests was because it wasn't doing as well, and plants that are like a little bit harder to take care of or getting sick will be more prone to getting pest infestations. It's the same plant, but it's the variegated version, so it has those, again, that interesting coloring on the leaves. There's these white patches. It's very beautiful. I really wasn't sold on it at first, but I've really fallen in love with the plant because it grows very quickly. Again, another really good beginner plant, and it does move its leaves with the light, so that's actually pretty cool too. Just a couple more notes about the Maranta leuconeura. They can tolerate lower light like the Calathea, and I keep mine in bright indirect light, so an east-facing window, and they seem to really like it there, and they are not toxic. It's the same with the Calathea. They're non-toxic to animals, so that's a definite plus as well. Plant number 8 is called Rhipsalis. They are jungle cacti. I believe most of them are non-toxic to animals, and they're pretty easy care. And I love them because they're really unique and strange looking. So this is a Hadiora bambusioides, I think. They grow in these little segments, and they can eventually trail down. Although this one, the new growth that's really springy here, is like standing up, which is quite cute. Here's another example. It's another type of Rhipsalis. This is called a mistletoe cactus also. So like the Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving cacti are all in the same family. And again, this can trail down, it can flower, it gets these little adorable white flowers in the winter. So you're not supposed to water these as much in the winter because they're susceptible to root rot, but in the summer they will tolerate more water than your typical like desert cactus because they're not a desert cactus. Here's another example. The forms are different, the textures are different, and they're just like really interesting looking, and I like plants that look a little bit odd. Number 9 is the Hoya plant. And Hoya come in a bunch of different species, coloration, size of leaves. They're commonly known as the wax plant. So this is a more common Hoya that I've staked up so that it can climb. This was the first Hoya that I bought. I bought it with like maybe 4 leaves, and now it's gotten quite a bit bigger. So these are pretty slow growing. I've had this for 2 years now, but they do flower eventually. I don't know a ton about how to get them to flower. Check out Doug Chamberlain of Vermont Hoyas if you want a real Hoya expert. And just kind of a word of warning, Hoyas are super popular right now, so they can be quite expensive, but you can find more common Hoya, like the Hoya carnosa, or compacta is also another one that's pretty inexpensive and easy to find. But just like know that they're very popular right now, so some places are really cranking up the prices. In terms of care, these are pretty easy care. They are semi-succulent, so that means that the leaves store water. So if the leaf, again, like the snake plant, is like cardboard, do not water. It's when the leaves start to get softer and more pliable that you can think about watering, but do not overwater, especially in the winter. With a lot of plants in the winter, you want to really adjust how much you water them, and water them when they really need it, not on a specific schedule. Hoya are pretty easy care plants. I would say they're good for beginners, and just don't overwater them. That's kind of my mantra. I think Hoya are non-toxic to animals, but I've also read that the sap is toxic. So this is one where, you know, with any plant, you kind of don't want to take a chance. Here's another one. Looks kind of gross, but yellow leaf. It's okay. At number 10, a super common, easy to find plant, though they are getting more popular and again the prices are going up, is the philodendron hederaceum. So it looks kind of similar to the pothos, but instead of the leaves kind of being a little bit more cupped and standing up, these leaves are heart-shaped and they point downward. So these are trailing plants. This is philodendron hederaceum micans, which is a little bit harder to find. They have these velvety leaves and people really love them right now, so that's a little bit more rare. But if you're looking for like the most common, there's a jade color variety that's really beautiful. Easy to care for, a lower light plant, but do not overwater. Watch the leaves to see if they curl inward, and you can let the soil get pretty dry. So thank you for watching. If you watched this whole video, you are really a brave soul, and I really appreciate it. And it means that you're really interested in learning more about plants, and I am too. So feel free to correct me if I've said anything incorrect in the comments below. Share your experience, ask questions. Most of my information comes from just like consuming a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of podcasts, and also using my trusty resources like the Houseplant Encyclopedia, which will tell you things like watering, light, etc. Bye, friends with plants. Have a good day. Happy holidays. Hang in there.